Welcome to the Friday, May 16th. Oh my God, that's what he looks like? Episode of On Iowa Politics, everyone. On this week's podcast, Iowa's Attorney General in the Big Apple. Government transparency advocates warn the governor about a bill on her desk. And early voting is underway in Iowa's June 4 primary. Hello, everyone out there, including on YouTube. I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week, we have our full roster. We have Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief Tom Barton with us. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Erin.
Lee Des Moines Bureau Chief Caleb McCullough is here. Hello, Caleb.
Good afternoon, Erin.
We have Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times. Hello, Sarah.
Greetings, Erin.
And Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal as well. Hello, Jared.
Video killed the podcasting star, Erin.
We shall see. We shall see. And finally, joining us is Gazette columnist Todd Dorman. Hello, Todd.
Good afternoon.
Let's jump right into it. First up this week, Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird traveled to New York City on Monday this week, not to see The Outsiders on Broadway, but to attend former President Donald Trump's trial over allegations that he falsified business records to hide a $130,000 payment to a former pornographic film actress to ensure her silence over an alleged affair between her and Trump back in 2006. Bird entered the courtroom with Trump's entourage, sat through proceedings, then made comments to reporters afterward. Bird, in a statement, called the trial politically motivated. It bears noting here that Bird, as Iowa's AG, has sued the Biden administration at least 17 times, including 8 in the past 2 months. Tom, this was interesting for multiple reasons, but among them were the questions of how and who paid for Bird's trip to New York. Tell us how that played out.
Attorney General Brenna Bird was asked Tuesday who paid for her visit to New York, and she said no taxpayer dollars were used. Her office sent out a fairly brief statement that just said no taxpayer dollars were used, but didn't specify who financed the trip. And then when asked a follow-up question about that on Wednesday, I believe, today's...
Yeah, it was Tuesday.
It was Tuesday.
Yeah,
sorry, my bad. Anyway, on Tuesday, when asked a follow-up question by reporters about, again, great, no taxpayer dollars were used, but who actually financed the trip, she wouldn't answer their questions and walked away. And then her campaign later followed up to say and confirm that the Republican Attorney General's Association paid for the trip. Campaign said that the Republican Attorney General's Association invited attorneys general to go to Manhattan, show support for President Trump, and that Attorney General Bird was one of those attorney generals who accepted the invitation, and the association covered the expenses.
Todd, I wanted to ask you, because you wrote about the AG's NYC trip, and let me know what you had to say in your column. And then also, let me ask you the political question here. Was the Attorney General auditioning for anything?
Maybe she was on Broadway. I don't know. I didn't see her entire itinerary.
That wasn't the kind of audition I had in mind.
She's,
was she auditioning for something in a Trump administration?
I think she's going to get an EGOT. That's what I think. I think she's got hidden talents. The Republican Attorneys General Association gave her $2 million during the campaign, so I'm not surprised they invited her to come along and sit behind the president in the courtroom. I mean, it sounds like the main reason these office holders from all across the country, congressmen, senators, AGs, are coming to basically attack this prosecution because of the gag order. Trump can't. So they're basically, they're Trump until he can speak, I guess would be one way to put it. So I thought the optics were weird with the attorney generals in that, I mean, here are these state prosecutors going to another state into a courtroom to, show opposition to another state prosecutor trying to, charge Donald Trump with falsifying financial documents with the hopes of burying his porn star affair and keeping it from voters. I realize that bad form is now about the only form, but I thought it was interesting to see our attorney general kind of, argue that politics shouldn't be in the courtroom when the whole section she was sitting in was full of politics. There were politicians galore, and as you say,
there was politics literally in the courtroom.
Yes, she brought it. She brought politics there herself, I'm sure, and so did others. But and as you said, Erin, you don't have to wait more than a few days for the attorney general to announce another lawsuit against the Biden administration over, minor stuff like climate change and LGBTQ rights of students and things like that. So, and that's been the trademark of her tenure so far, is that she is a highly political attorney general. So, once again, hypocrisy is dead. I've declared it dead.
To your point about the gag order, Thursday actually, Representative Lauren Boebert tweeted, they may have gagged President Trump. They didn't gag me. They didn't gag the rest of us. So that's maybe tipping the hand a little bit about the reason for being up there. And earlier in the week, Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville said, hopefully we'll have more and more senators and congressmen go up every day to represent him and be able to go out and overcome this gag order. So
yeah, that is the main reason they're doing this, because the court can't do anything to them. They can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter. The thing that makes it okay is that there isn't anything going on in the country as far as issues or crises or anything like that would mean that those folks might want to be in their own states or back at the Senate or Congress. I guess they're about done for the summer, aren't they? They're going to adjourn. It's going to be they're getting out of school early, I think. So
now, one senator who won't be there is Senator Chuck Grassley. He gave his thoughts on it this week in a conference call with reporters. He called the trial a political lynching. He said he was referring to the language that Justice Clarence Thomas used to describe his own confirmation hearings. But that was his appraisal. But he said that he's too busy in Washington, D.C., so he's not going to be making it for the hearing, the trial.
Grassley's going to be careful talking like Clarence Thomas. Someone will take him on a multi-million-dollar vacation somewhere, which I guess wouldn't be all bad, but he wouldn't be home this summer to take pictures next to the corn growing, which I would miss. I know a lot of other people would.
Maybe he could get John Oliver to offer a gigantic luxury RV to him too. You brought up a good point too, Todd, that I wanted to reiterate, that this is a state level case. Some of the messaging we've heard from these little appearances outside the Trump trial have been critical of Biden and his DOJ trying to take on Trump through the courts during the campaign, and this has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. This is a state level prosecution. So,
and they're charges that were handed down by a grand jury. They weren't conjured up by the prosecutor on his own.
Yep,
or her own.
All right. Moving on, and real quick, I probably should have said this at the top since we're on the YouTubes now. You may notice only one of us is not displaying his video, and that's because this doofus is sitting at Big Creek State Park near Polk City, Iowa. We're recording on Thursday afternoon per usual, and almost immediately after we hit the stop button on this recording, I'm going to jump out here and cover a bill signing event. So my internet signal is not the strongest, so preserving bandwidth there by turning off my camera just in case you've been watching us on YouTube and wondering. Other than doing you a favor by not having to look at my face, that's the other reason. Moving on. Speaking of bill signing season in Iowa, it's winding down. Governor Reynolds is making her way through the 188 bills that were approved by the Iowa legislature during the 2024 session that concluded last month. She signed another batch this past week, including one of the more significant non-AEA bills of the session. And that was the latest redesign of the state's mental health care delivery system. She has until Sunday or Monday. We're still not quite sure as we sit here Thursday afternoon because of the legislature adjourning at 4:30 a.m. We're still not sure exactly what the deadline is, but it's coming up in a matter of a few days. And depending on when you're listening to this podcast, it may have already passed. One bill that's still pending, again, as we record here Thursday afternoon, is one that would enhance penalties for local government bodies and officials who violate the state's open meetings law. But this one is taking an interesting turn here as it awaits Reynolds' signature or veto. Open government advocates, including the Iowa Public Information Board and the Freedom of Information Council, have warned Reynolds that a late added amendment to the bill would gut the state's open meetings law. Caleb, we talked about this a little bit this week. You covered the final debate on the bill, and you were telling me that you remembered this actually coming up at during debate. So what is the concern here?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a semantics issue, but that can be important when you're writing laws, how they are read and come across. During debate, Democrat Chuck Eisenhart brought this up. The bill changes a clause in state law that kind of gives an exception or gives a guidance to what doesn't constitute a meeting. So the law right now says that a meeting is not it does not include a gathering of members of a governmental body for purely ministerial or social purposes where there is no discussion of policy or no intent to avoid the purpose of this chapter. So you can imagine maybe a city Christmas party or a any sort of social event that a few members of a board are at, that wouldn't be a problem. The addition that was made was a gathering that includes members of a local body that's hosted by a political party, candidate, or a civic organization. And the bill's floor, so it said that does not count as a meeting. The bill's floor manager said that they added that so that it would be clear that members of the body can attend political events if they don't discuss specific policy. In his remarks on the floor, he made it clear that their intent was still to preclude policy discussion during those meetings. So you can imagine maybe there are 3 Republicans on a 5-member board of supervisors, and they want to attend the local county Republican Party meeting. They wanted to allow them to be able to do that. The concern comes because the way that the bill is worded, the no discussion of policy piece that is in the earlier piece that is already in law does not carry over into the new exception about political or civic events. So as the kind of Freedom of Information Council pointed out, you can imagine those same 3 supervisors are invited to a dinner reception by the Chamber of Commerce where they discuss property taxes or any number of policies. Under the wording and the kind of the plain reading of this bill, that would be allowed, but it is currently not allowed in law. So the concern is that they created this big loophole that is allowing private meetings where there weren't any allowed before.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, Caleb, and like you said, and you described it perfectly. It's really about semantics. It's about, well, like Chuck Eisenhart, the Democratic legislator, said during debate on the floor. He said, "I can hear my high school grammar teacher in my ear saying this isn't right," and because that qualifying phrase wasn't carried forward, that phrase that says while discussing policy, the Public Information Board, the Freedom of Information Council, their interpretation is that now creates a loophole that allows for government officials to attend a political or a civic event and have these discussions without triggering the requirements of the open meetings law. And those are things like, you have to post at least 24 hours advance notice of a meeting, and you have to have most of your discussions in public where the public can listen in, and those things wouldn't be required. So it's going to be interesting. As I said, we're winding down in literally the last few days of when Reynolds has to determine whether to sign these into law. She, as we sit here again on Thursday afternoon, this is one of about 20-ish bills that she has not yet taken action on. So it's going to be interesting to see what she does. And Sarah, this bill started, that was an amendment, like we said, that was added literally at the last minute during floor debate. The bill started as a response to an issue in Davenport. Tell us about that and what was the actual genesis of this bill.
So the bill started from Quad Cities lawmakers, specifically Gary Moore of Bettendorf, was really concerned about in Davenport. Their city administrator left and amid allegations that she had been harassed by elected officials with $1.6 million. And at the time, the city council had no intention to vote publicly on that separation agreement. There's a long history or a long story. They eventually did end up voting on it in December, but that was several months after the agreement was signed. And so this bill was intended to make the penalties steeper for officials that did not follow public meetings law. And I think that amendment, and correct me if I'm wrong, was provided also by a Quad Cities lawmaker, Scott Webster.
Yes, correct.
And I think in Caleb's story, he says that it wasn't their intention to with that amendment to allow discussions of policy in those types of events, but it's certainly, at least according to the Iowa Freedom of Information Council and the Public Information Board, it would certainly undercut the intention of the bill, which is to better enforce public meetings and have clearer standards for public meetings law and higher penalties to enforce that.
That's what makes it fascinating, is that's how the bill started, as with the intent of stronger enforcement of this law. And then this amendment gets tacked on that again, because of perhaps poor wording and in the view of these two groups would very much gut that law. It sounded like you were going to say something, Caleb.
Yeah, just the interesting thing, and you may have some insight into this, Erin, is that Representative Segrist mentioned during the debate that they had, I don't think he named the Information Board or the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Council directly, but he said he had spoken with Freedom of Information experts, or somebody had, about that specific amendment, and that they didn't have a problem with it. I don't know if it was, not giving them the exact wording, just kind of a general explanation of what they thought it did, and that's kind of what created the miscommunication. But it's interesting that that was at least claimed during debate.
Yeah, that's a good point, Caleb. And I did talk to Representative Segrist for my story this week on it, and he reiterated that, and he didn't say specifically who it was, but the impression I got was he talked to either someone out in the lobby or someone from one of the groups, and he said, Representative Segrist said at that time, no concerns were raised to him. The one thing I will say, and I did note this in the story, is this bill was passed in both chambers on the 18th, which was the second to last day of the session, and the House passed it literally just before midnight. So if you want to talk about maybe an example of why that kind of legislating is maybe not the ideal way to make public policy, this may be an example of that. All right. Finally, this week, the early voting period in Iowa's June 4 primary election is underway. Started earlier this week. We sort of covered this on a previous episode, but since Iowans now are literally able to cast their ballots, and in the interest of not assuming that everyone listens to every episode every week, I want to believe that's true, but let's just assume the possibility that it's not. Let's go over this again and have everyone tell us about a primary race or two that they're watching. Obviously, the general election's the big ticket, but what's going on in the June 4 primary we're all watching, and we'll go around the horn here, and Jared, you can get us started.
The main two that I'm focusing on for the primary, which are both competitive, at least in the sense that two folks of the same party are running against each other, are House District 13, which pits Lamar's resident Travis Sitzman against Sioux City resident Noah Weisler for one-term Representative Ken Carlson's seat. A little while back when I talked about this race, I talked about the fact that both of those gentlemen had concerns raised about not living within the district, and ultimately the Iowa State Objection Panel rejected the challenges to the candidacies. So they're all good to go as far as that goes to run in June. And because they're both kind of blank slates, first timers running, I am most interested in the race because of that. And then the other race that I'm focused on and I'm doing interviews for is Iowa's 4th Congressional District, the reddest in the state. Representative Randy Feenstra of Hull is being challenged by Kevin Virgil of Sutherland. Caleb talked last week about the jabs they were trading in person and through flyers or booklets or whatever at the state convention. And also last month, I reported on them sparring over a number of topics, including former Representative Steve King, who's endorsed Kevin Virgil and is not a fan of Feenstra at all. In that same story, I also noted that they went back and forth over support for Israel and whose real hometown is what, because folks have made jokes about Virgil being a New Yorker and only recently coming back to Iowa. So I'm focused on the race, not just because we're getting all this kind of jousting, but also because, and I think I've said this before too, that it really is a good test for what Feenstra's popularity in the district is among the party faithful. He didn't have an opponent in 2022, so couldn't really gauge it then. And 2020 was a 5-person field, whereas this is a one-on-one, which is probably the best possible way to gauge within a primary what one candidate's actual strength is among the base. So we'll see how much support he actually commands among Republicans in our part of the state here pretty soon.
That's a really good point, Jared, about the one-on-one aspect of that primary, and we've seen, and I'm not saying we're going to see the same in Iowa. Obviously, the 4th district's different and it's unique, but in some other primaries across the country, in recent weeks, we've seen some interesting results in Republican primaries. So it will be interesting to see Feenstra's.
On that point, Erin, obviously different state, but we're pretty close by. Just this week in Nebraska, all of the sort of MAGA type Republicans that were challenging or just kind of far right, not necessarily MAGA back challengers, they all kind of went up in flames going against the incumbent. So it'll be interesting to see if that holds over here on the other side of the state line.
There you go. All right, let's skip to the other side of the state, and Sarah, over there in the Quad Cities area, what are you watching in this primary season?
Yeah, well, really the big one is Marionette Miller Meeks versus David Patch. Marionette, we've talked before on the podcast, Marionette Miller Meeks, first one very narrowly, 2020, won again pretty handily this time in 2022. And so this is the first time that she's faced a primary challenge since she's been a congressional representative. She didn't have a primary challenge in 2022. And David Patch, he is the organizer of the Quad Cities Prayer Breakfast. He's a minister, I should say, has a ministerial organization that he runs, and so is very active in the faith community. There, I see some signs around the Quad Cities for him. I think he's got some name recognition in the Quad Cities, but outside of that, obviously the Southeast Iowa is a big place. Marionette Miller Meeks is from Ottumwa and has had the endorsement of establishment Republicans, including Kim Reynolds. So it'll be interesting to see just how much support Marionette Miller Meeks and David Patch will each get. But certainly the single Democrat in the race, Christina Bohannon, is setting up for a race against Marionette Miller Meeks for the general.
All right, very good. Tom, how about you? What's going on that you're watching for running up to June 4?
Yeah, to be honest, not a lot of, I guess, exciting primary races in our area, in our neck of the woods, in Cedar Rapids and in Iowa City. I mean, the biggest one that I'm going to be interested in is the primary race between Marionette Miller Meeks and David. And the reason why I say that, and I want to bring Caleb into this because he was there at the state convention. It seems like he got, pretty strong receptive support at the state convention going after Marionette Miller Meeks for ostensibly, not being conservative enough. I think it is interesting that, she's drawn this challenge from the right. It will be interesting to see how much support David Patch gets. I guess, it makes me think back to, the incident last year where she received death threats for not backing Jim Jordan in his bid for Speaker of the House. You had two county GOP organizations, I think their chair people, essentially censure her over her support for same-sex marriage. So, I guess to me, it speaks to the fact that there seems to be a faction within the Iowa GOP. Now, how big that group is, kind of remains to be seen. We'll see how that plays out in the primary. But, there definitely seem to be some hardline conservatives who are unhappy with her and some of the stances that she's taking, and maybe feeling like she's, I guess, kind of part of the mainstream within the party, and are looking for, I guess, somebody who's more associated or more affiliated with maybe kind of that MAGA movement. I guess, Caleb, what was your reaction to, I guess, the reaction at the state convention to David Patch?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely got applause and on his speech, about being a dedicated conservative and that kind of thing. Marianne Miller Meeks also got applause when she spoke. I don't know if anyone got noticeably more. I definitely remember Kevin Virgil getting more applause than David Patch specifically. So how accurate of a metric that is, who's to know? But I think it's hard to tell how competitive that race is.
I was going to say yard signs and applause. That's the two big metrics to go by.
And crowd size to finish out the Holy Trinity. All right, Caleb, what else are you watching for?
As a Southeast and Eastern Iowa and Northwest Iowa podcast, we don't have any reporters in the Central Iowa, Des Moines. Well, we have reporters there, no papers there area, but I'm interested in the 3rd District Democratic primary that's getting some news right now. You have Lennon Bacam, a longtime USDA official, and Melissa Vine, who has been a leader of a local nonprofit. This is the Democratic primary here. Neither of them seems to have, they don't seem to have very significant differences policy-wise. I've heard some maybe thoughts that Vine is slightly more progressive compared to Bacam, but it's not like she's aggressively attacking him from the left or anything. Bacam has a lot of institutional Democratic support, so that's definitely there. But there is now an ethics complaint against Melissa Vine's campaign for allegations of gaming a local organization's endorsement process potentially, and her campaign manager was fired shortly afterwards. That's been interesting to watch, but it's hard to tell how much how competitive that is, how much support either one of them has. Looking at endorsements and kind of institutional support, it does look to be behind Bacam, but Vine has also notched some endorsements as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that one as well, Caleb. And like you said, it's not in any of our coverage areas, so we don't typically cover the 3rd District, but that is going to be an interesting one to me. And it's such a big one for Democrats because ultimately that's the person who will take on Republican incumbent Zach Nunn in one of the most competitive districts, not just in Iowa, but in the country. So Democrats obviously trying to get the candidate there that gives them the best shot of winning that seat back. And so it'll be interesting to see who comes out of that primary. Todd, any other ones out there that you're watching for? What are you going to be F5 and 4 on June 4th?
I've been watching paint dry and grass grow, and the Tootsie Pop wrappers build up on my desk. Not to suggest this campaign sucks or anything, but just that I like a good Tootsie Pop. I'm more interested in this David Patch thing now that I've found out on his Facebook page. The guy looks like the Golden Bachelor. I mean, he's kind of a silver-haired minister. And he had a fundraiser this week, or a meeting on the Second Amendment at Davenport Guns, which is, I mean, it's not a clever name, but it tells you all you need to know. And he's accusing her of voting with Nancy Pelosi to restrict your Second Amendment rights, and refused to get rid of the ATF, and wouldn't get rid of something called the NFA. And I'm not completely familiar with that acronym. I'll have to do more digging, but it sounds like he is he's trying to find lots of ways to sifting through votes and amendments and things to find ways that she's obviously. I mean, when you think of Marionette Miller Meeks, you're thinking anti-gun and woke. I mean, what if the 3%ers that she posed for that photo with had known? Who knows? It's a good thing. But yeah, that's the most interesting race around here. I mean, there's some legislative races that will be kind of interesting to see who wins. I haven't kept close track. I think the first district is going to be fascinating to see if this the paunch, whatever you want to call them, is going to find enough preppers and others that will come to the polls and vote for him.
So the first district primary, the clear winner, and also with the benefit of going to YouTube now, you all get to see what the rest of us look like when Todd is making his jokes.
Yeah, I should have thought of that. You should have all gone dark. You don't want the Washington Post to get the wrong idea.
I knew you'd go there. I knew you'd go there.
Todd, part of my job now, I have to do SEO stuff, and I got to say, Davenport Guns, that's pretty good SEO.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Gonna get you some great search results.
That's true.
My wife used to live, when she was growing up, next to a place called Hicks Guns, which I thought was also a very appropriate gun shop moniker.
Something like that always works, or just naming your thing, like starting it with like double A's at the very start of the name of the place. That works too, I think.
AAA guns.
First in the phone book. Ask your parents what a phone book is, kids.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, a smashing success for our YouTube debut, with the exception of the host not being able to turn on his video. But other than that, a wonderful first time. We hope you enjoy that added feature and that you check us out that way in the future. That's it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on YouTube now. And you can also find the podcast each week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. And now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you will receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. Lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Non-Pareil, and the Sioux City Journal. Free by Tone DeBoss is playing us out this week. If you know an Iowa band or musician who should be featured on the podcast, please send us a sound file. To the whole gang, Tom Barton, Caleb McCullough, Sarah Watson, Jared McNett, Todd Dorman, and our producer, Bailey Chehan, I'm Erin Murphy. Thanks for listening.
We gon' party all night and all day, though, and we ain't gonna stop until the cops say so. Girl, you too playful. Unk on the grill, go ahead, get a plateful. Got spades on the table, close the last book, up my sleeve is an ace, though. No more chains on my ankle, had me tied down like a ship with an anchor. Now I'm tied up with a suit and a case full, about to beat the case, got cheese like queso.